As Republicans continue to jeopardize the national economy by refusing to raise the debt ceiling, Democrats are planning a messaging offense to condemn the GOP's fiscal irresponsibility. Intrigued? Then click that like and subscribe and enjoy the video. Democrats, thank God, are continuing to maintain a hard line with respect to negotiations about the debt ceiling increase. So again, as a reminder, the debt ceiling is a congressionally imposed limit on what the United States Treasury can borrow, in terms of finances, to pay America's bills. It has nothing to do with potential spending, has nothing to do with future spending. It's about spending money to pay bills that the United States is already committed to paying, okay? It would be disastrous, not just for the United States, but for the globe, since the U.S. economy is the backbone of the global economy, for the United States to not raise the debt ceiling, and for the United States to default, consequently, on the national debt. It's never happened before. It would be disastrous, okay? What do I mean by disastrous? Well, here's what I mean. Number one, we would lose trillions upon trillions upon trillions of dollars in household wealth. That means you and I and others like us would lose retirement, that we would lose savings. With the unemployment rate, which is right now under President Biden an historic low of 3.4%, would jump to 6 or 7%. The United States would accrue hundreds of billions of dollars in borrowing fees, right, when we inevitably tried to pay our bills after that. Our credit standing would drop. It would just be a nightmare for everybody. Real, hardcore, like tangible pain for everyday Americans, okay? It's not abstract. And President Biden is rightly refusing to negotiate on this. He says, look, everybody, the U.S. government, Democrats, Republicans, all of us, we have a constitutional obligation to protect the full faith and credit of the U.S. debt ceiling, okay, or the United States credit, right? And in order to do that, we have to raise or suspend the debt ceiling according to Congress. I'm not going to negotiate on that. I'm not offering any conditions on it. I'm saying it just needs to be done. And Biden and Democrats are prepared to do it right now. Republicans have to play ball, though, especially because they control the House of Representatives, and both chambers of Congress have to approve raising the debt ceiling. I'm pretty sure President Biden has to sign the measure into law, right? So Democrats are coming to the table saying, look, let's not play chicken over this. Let's not try to blackmail one another on it. Let's just do this, okay? But predictably, Republicans are saying, no, well, before we do this, we want you to do some things for us. We want certain concessions. We want spending cuts. Now, they haven't publicly announced what those spending cuts are. They have sworn that despite decades of trying to cut Social Security and Medicare, that's not the sort of spending cuts they want. Guys, I know we've always gone after Social Security and Medicare in the past, but this time we're not doing that. We understand it's really unpopular. We don't want to do that. We just want some spending cuts. We don't want to tell you what they are. We're not proposing any particular cuts. We just want cuts. According to the Biden administration, according to Democrats, Republicans have not identified what cuts they want. And Biden says we're not going to negotiate over this, which is really, really good. It's a good decision on President Biden's part. But again, Republicans are acting in bad faith. They're trying to blackmail Biden. And they've done this before. Biden has seen this before because Republicans did this to President Obama when Joe Biden was his vice president. And as a result of the 2011 debt ceiling crisis, the U.S. debt, like our credit score, dropped for the first time in U.S. history. We were no longer like quadruple A rating. We dropped, according to various international credit agencies. We ate hundreds of billions of dollars of additional borrowing costs. It was fiscally irresponsible in the extreme. And it was because of Republicans. And they've done this since Newt Gingrich. They've technically proposed cuts to Social Security and Medicare since Reagan. But in terms of using, trying to leverage a domestic and international economic crisis to force spending cuts has been the Republican playbook since Newt Gingrich under the Clinton administration. Why am I telling you all this? Here's why I'm telling you. Because Joe Biden, thank God, is finally deciding to take the offensive. And he's like, look, the GOP is actually the fiscally irresponsible one. They're the fiscally irresponsible ones. They're not the party of a prosperous economy or fiscal responsibility. They're the reckless spenders, and they spend money on stupid stuff. So finally, Democrats are working to reclaim the narrative. Like he says on Twitter, Republicans on the Hill like to talk about the deficit. Well, if you add up their plans so far, they'll add to $3 trillion to the debt. It's mostly going to the rich and big pharma. My budget will reduce the deficit by $2 trillion. What's in the rest of theirs? Republicans in Congress say they care about the deficit, and yet the presidents will reduce the deficit by around $2 trillion, and the GOP's would increase the deficit by $3 trillion. Yeah, and it's being echoed by the White House. They're finally trying to reclaim the narrative. And apparently in a speech later on today, President Biden plans to make that case as well directly to the constituents. This is really, really good, okay? Because despite the fact that the U.S. economy for the past 35 years, by many metrics, for the past 60 years by other metrics like real GDP growth, the economy performs better when a Democrat is running the country. It's a matter of fact. You can cherry pick certain data points at certain points, no doubt about it. Like the stock market did really well at times under President Trump. No question about it. But generally, in terms of job growth, yes, in terms of stock market performance as well, in terms of real GDP growth, in terms of wage keeping up with inflation, all these things, real wage growth, most metrics for the past 35 to 60 years, the economy performs better under Democrats. And Democrats are as, if not more, responsible with respect to the national debt. You look at Donald Trump, who swore up and down he was going to not only not add to the debt, he was going to get rid of the debt that he inherited from President Obama and President Bush and so on and so forth. He was going to get rid of it all. That's how good of a businessman he is. And then in 4 years, he added more to it than any president in a 4-year term, nearly $8 trillion, much of which was under COVID. But of course, he mismanaged COVID, so I don't give him credit there. And much of it was in $2 trillion in tax cuts for the uber rich. And he didn't pair that with any spending cuts. And that's the other thing. In terms of raising the debt ceiling, Republicans raised the debt ceiling 3 times under Donald Trump and expected Democrats to go along with it, which we did. They didn't propose any. Republicans didn't say, look, we'll only raise the debt ceiling if we pair this with spending cuts. They didn't care. Donald Trump was like a reckless spender. He was like a guy at a casino, man. He was like somebody at Target. He was just spending money left, right, and center. But Republicans recognized that it would have been irresponsible to not raise the debt ceiling, even under those conditions, because the economic consequences would have been disastrous. And Democrats recognized it too. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, we recognized it. Even when Donald Trump was in office, we didn't play games with the debt ceiling when Donald Trump was in power, even though we hated the guy. That goes to show you the asymmetry of the mindset here. Even when Republicans are in power, even when a particularly annoying Republican is in power, like Donald Trump, that a lot of Democrats can't stand, you can still bet on Democrats to do the right thing, right? That's just how, and right now, Republicans are banking on that. Right now, Republicans are banking on President Biden and Democrats folding like a lawn chair. But there's a reason the United States doesn't negotiate with terrorists on paper, right? Because it sets a dangerous precedent. And Republicans have already done that, again, under the Obama administration, under the Clinton administration. And President Biden is wisely saying, we're not going to do this. We're not going to play chicken with the economy. The economic consequences would be disastrous for you and I and your voters and my voters and every American. And right now, and we're going to make sure that the American public knows who to blame if that happens. It would not be in anybody's financial interest. So President Biden is wisely expecting Republicans to eventually fold, and they will. They may do it at such a time that, again, our credit score drops and that extraordinary measures, which is what the Treasury Department is currently in to pay our bills, the Treasury Department might run out of options, and the United States might have to eat hundreds of billions of dollars in borrowing costs, but eventually Republicans will fold because it would be disastrous for them in terms of PR, but it would be disastrous in terms of their bank accounts. Kevin McCarthy's bank account would suffer if the U.S., defaulted on its debt. Donald Trump's finances would suffer if the U.S. defaulted on its debt. It would just be disastrous for everybody. So Biden has taken a hard line, and he's using the opportunity to take the offensive. If you add up all the proposals that my Republican friends in Congress have offered so far, they would add another $3 trillion to the debt in 10 years. You'll see that my budget will invest in America, lower costs, and protect and strengthen Social Security and Medicare while cutting the deficit by $2 trillion in 10 years. And the fact of the matter is the deficit has reduced year after year under President Biden. Where did I find the exact thing here? Hang on. Oh, AP, you failed me, buddy. You failed me. Yes, the White House fact sheet said Republicans would increase the debt by $2.7 trillion by prolonging the Trump-era tax cuts, in addition to cutting a corporate minimum tax established by President Biden and other policies that would add to the debt. Sorry, I wanted to find what in particular the White House was making the case from Republicans would contribute to the debt. Republicans want to increase the debt by prolonging the Trump-era 2017 tax cuts, and they would want to cut the, I think it was a 15% minimum corporate tax rate, which President Biden has imposed on corporations, which would, again, so that would reduce the amount of money that the federal government is getting to pay its bills, or it would reduce federal government revenue. And the Republican Party will not reduce its spending, right? They're not going to propose defense cuts. They said they don't want to cut Social Security and Medicare. So they want to do what they did in 2017, which is create deficit spending. That's what they did under President Trump. Those 2017 Trump-era tax cuts added to the deficit, $2 trillion, right? Because, again, Republicans want to cut tax for the super rich, but they also don't want to cut spending unless it's welfare programs to hurt people who need it the most. So I'm glad that President Biden is taking the offensive here. I hope it continues. Democrats need to take the messaging offensive. We need to reclaim the narrative that Democrats are not the fiscally responsible party. To be sure, you can have your disagreements with the Democratic Party in terms of its spending principles, its spending practices, and certainly Democrats can and are big spenders. President Biden has been a big spender, just not to the extent that President Trump did, not to the extent that Republican presidents usually are. Democrats usually spend things on important matters. Infrastructure. So when Donald Trump is spending trillions of dollars on, again, tax cuts for the rich in 2017, Joe Biden is spending trillions of dollars on national infrastructure, not just in blue states, not just for the rich, but for red states and poor people as well. So again, it's not enough to just look at the dollar amount, even though that also looks bad for Republicans. It's also important to look at what you're spending that dollar amount on. And Republicans want to spend it on silly shit. To use a metaphor, they want to swipe the credit card for a flat screen TV. Biden and Democrats are swiping the credit card to keep the electricity on or to get groceries, right? So the spending priorities and the spending practices are much better under Democrats. Joe Biden is right to try to reclaim the narrative. Make sure you help him do it. Hey, you! Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, and I hope that you did, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. And if you absolutely hated the video, the best revenge for you is also to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. That'll teach me. If you want to share an opinion or share some feedback, go ahead and leave a comment, all right? 2023 is a year of change, hence the aggressive rebrand and commitment to new content. Inspired by my friends Luke Beasley and STV Philly, my personal goal for this channel is to hit 40,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So I'm hoping you'll do me a solid by spreading the word and the videos to potential fans and hate watchers alike. And in the meantime, we'll be pondering politics again with you very soon.